The Chicago Bulls pulled off a victory last night versus the number one seed at the time, Minnesota Timberwolves. Why is this team so frustrated? Y'all know we're going to talk about it and break it down. And it's tonight, the matchup versus the Atlanta Hawks, the game of the year for your Chicago Bulls. Y'all know we're going to talk about it and break it down, but you gotta hear the music first.
Cognac, gang.
Shy Bulls Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's episode of Shy Bulls Podcast. If you tuned in with me today, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Now, last night, your Chicago Bulls won the game versus the leading team in the Western Conference as late as they entered the matchup, the number one seed, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Chicago Bulls, who was a team that pretty much in their last 5 games put up multiple stinkers. They were 1-4 in the last 5 games, and then they went into the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we didn't really know what to expect. But prior to the game, C-Dub did come out and say, hey, this is one of those games to where the Chicago Bulls win, and they try to reel us all back in. That leads me to say, this is why the Chicago Bulls are so damn frustrated. This Chicago Bulls team is so frustrated because you come out, you show effort, you put things together, you hit tough baskets, you make sure you keep up with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then you pull it out at the end with clutch buckets and great opportunities that came from multiple contributors on the Chicago Bulls. That's what makes all this frustrating. Just about a week ago, probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we seen the Chicago Bulls be 1 game under 500. And then they proceed to lose to the Houston Rockets. And then they proceed to lose to the Boston Celtics. Then they went on and lost to the Washington G Leaguers. Literally, the Washington Wizards had their G Leaguers out there, and the Chicago Bulls lost that game as well. And they're just so frustrated because that Rockets game was right there in the hands for the taking for the Chicago Bulls, and they let it slip right through their fingers. The Boston Celtics, I can understand that. They top team in the Eastern Conference, a tough team, firepower all over. Bulls lose that. That's kind of like you kind of expected that in a way. But the Washington Wizards, you lose that game. You come in, you beat the Indiana Pacers, and then you lose to the Brooklyn Nets and get blown out. By the Brooklyn Nets. And then last night you come in and you beat the damn Minnesota Timberwolves and you leave everyone like, bro, why can't we get this consistency out of our team each and every night? Each and every night. We know what's at stake. We know what's right there. We know that the Chicago Bulls have an opportunity for a playoff spot. That's what they're playing for. But where's the intensity? Where's the awareness to say, hey, we got to come in this game and we got to be firing on all cylinders and we got to get out to good starts. We got to come out of halftime and start those third quarters. The first 5 minutes of those third quarters got to be on par. We got to be ready for that. And instead, depending on the matchup, the Chicago Bulls play down the competition. They play up to competition a lot of times, but they also play down to some competition as well. Are those just signs of a young team? Could be. Are those signs of a team that's trying to find their way? It could be. Are those signs of a team that just may not have it all as a team? Probably. But we've seen the Chicago Bulls beat the Indiana Pacers 3 times this season. We've seen the Chicago Bulls beat the 76ers with Joel Embiid at that time. They beaten the Cavs after getting whooped by them. They came back and got their lick back. And then we thought that everything was turning around when the Chicago Bulls went on their West Coast trip a few weeks ago and went 3-1. 3-1 to where we was up late night, kicking it, laughing, talking, chopping it up, talking Bulls. And we was like, man, the best thing the Bulls could do on this road trip is go 2-2. They exceeded expectations and went 3-1. So the question is how do you come back after all those things considered for this entirety of the season, and how you was able to beat some of those good teams that I previously mentioned, and then you throw in the Lakers in there, I believe once, then you throw in the Golden State Warriors, I believe they beat them once as well, and you see the Chicago Bulls fold to the Brooklyn Nets, the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference. You see the Chicago Bulls show no energy and just kind of, be a little lackadaisical when it comes to matching up versus the Washington Wizards. And I understand that sometimes you're not going to have, the up and up to play certain games. I understand that. But with the Bulls in their position, you have no days off. You have no days off. And I got to point to the guys that's on this team, DeMar DeRozan's of the world, your Alex Caruso's initially when the season started, your Nikola Vucevic. We can't come into this season thinking that it's going to be a cakewalk. We fighting for our lives, in the words of DeMar DeRozan. Well, those games versus the Nets, the Wizards, the Houston Rockets, and those in these last few weeks, those are not games that are showing me that you're fighting for your lives. If you're coming out and you are versus the Washington Wizards and you're down double digits in the first quarter. I believe in that first quarter, the Chicago Bulls lost like 30-17 or something like that in that first quarter. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just saying that you're not coming into this with the mindset that's conducive to what we need to see out of the Chicago Bulls. That's conducive to winning. We need to see the Chicago Bulls in that way and handle business the same way the Chicago Bulls handle business last night versus the number one seed at the time. They're not the number one seed right now, I believe. You need that every single game going down this stretch. You need that every single game going down the stretch. And that's what makes everything so frustrating, because we know this team can be so much better. We know they can be better defensively. We know that they can be better offensively. We know that they can be better when it comes to the intensity that is required to win these games down the stretch, because teams are fighting for position now. We know that. But one has to look at everything from all angles. On the flip side, you say, hey, this team is a young team. Hey, this team is going to go through some growing pains. Kobe White has not necessarily been himself since the All-Star break, since that hip injury. You know what I'm saying? Ayo Dosunmu has been consistent, but, sometimes those players are allowed to have a bad game. Alex Caruso, man, 6 of 6 from the three. That's not going to happen every night. But you have to find a way to win these games. That's what it comes down to. The frustration is boiling over is because 1 minute we're all done with this team, and then the next minute they're reeling us back in with some impressive wins. And last night was a very impressive win. They held Anthony Edwards to, I believe, 17 points until the fourth quarter. That's a win. A guy that's a lot of people are starting to place as the face of the league, the Chicago Bulls held them to 17 points until the fourth quarter. That's a win. Or when you go against, some of these other teams like the Los Angeles Clippers a few weeks ago, you see the Bulls battling and, going back and forth with the Los Angeles Clippers, and then they kind of let the rope go in the fourth quarter. But you're like, man, if they can keep and stay toe-to-toe with the team that has championship expectations like the Clippers, where is this every single night versus the bottom of the league when you play the Brooklyn Nets, when you play the Washington G Leaguers, when you play, some of those other teams that might be battling or in that same tier as you, like a Houston Rockets? That's why it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because we know the Bulls can be better, or at least we think they could be better, or at least we expect them to be better, and they continuously let us down. Last night was a step in the right direction, kind of, but I would say we got to temper our expectations, because just like we know that they was able to handle business last night versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, we got to tread and walk with caution to this game versus the Atlanta Hawks tonight. That leads us into our next topic of the show. The Chicago Bulls, after getting major contributions last night from Kobe White, stepping up in the fourth big time. DeMar DeRozan did his thing. That's why his name is not really being mentioned right here. But then you got your contributions from Kobe White last night in the clutch fourth quarter, stepping up and doing his thing. Then you had Alex Caruso starting the game out and then still being a menace defensively to take on the best player on the Minnesota Timberwolves and Anthony Edwards. Alex Caruso gave him hell. Then you get your contributions from Ayo Dosunmu, who is able to turn, you know, rebounds into quick buckets for the Chicago Bulls. Didn't give a damn who was down there in the paint during fast break, during the transition, and said, hey, I'm getting this basket and you're going to like it, whether you like it or not. Those major contributions is now what we need to see the Chicago Bulls bring on over to the matchup tonight versus the Atlanta Hawks. That matchup versus the Atlanta Hawks right now might be the matchup of the year for this Chicago Bulls team. The Atlanta Hawks right now, as of right now, before the games are played, are 1.5 games behind the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls have beaten them multiple times this season, but this game right here inches everything closer between these two teams to determine who, or kind of help us determine who's going to have their home court advantage within that first play-in game. So when you look at the Atlanta Hawks, since Trae Young went down, the Atlanta Hawks have been performing pretty damn well, putting a lot of pressure on the Chicago Bulls to keep pace with themselves on the opponents that they face on their schedule, because the Atlanta Hawks are pulling off some really, really good victories. They just beat the Celtics a few nights ago, and it was very impressive. And I believe the matchups against the Boston Celtics, they was down by 30 out the victory. So if the Chicago Bulls think they about to come in and lollygag and play around with this, they will be losing this game tonight. But if the Chicago Bulls come in with the mindset that they had last night versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Chicago Bulls should win this game. But it's going to all come with all hands on deck. It's no excuses. No one cares that there are players out. No one cares that people are battling and dealing with injuries. No one cares that, hey, Kobe White has been slumping a little bit or hasn't been as good as we expected him to be since the All-Star break. No one's going to care if Ayo Dosunmu 3 is not falling. No one's going to care if Nikola Vucevic isn't adding on and contributing in a way that we need him to with those double-doubles. We need it every single night. So this is the matchup of the year. We seen the Chicago Bulls inch closer and closer and closer to 500. For me, that ain't even necessary anymore. They can still get there. But right now, we got to take this thing one game at a time. And the game that's on the docket right now is the Atlanta Hawks tonight, with huge playoff implications. I know it's the play-in. I look at the play-in as an extension of the playoffs. You handle your business, you get in. You don't handle your business, you're going home. So right now, this is an ample opportunity for the Chicago Bulls to start, making sure that they hit these wins and get those dubs in the win column to make sure that that first play-in game is at home so you can take care of business. The next play-in game will be on the road. You know what I'm saying? And depending on how the Chicago Bulls perform at home, we can see how they perform on the road and play-in game number 2. But we cannot jump ahead. I will not jump ahead on this. Look, I know it's going to be people that want to come out here and give predictions for these last 7 games of the season. I say, look, you can have your predictions, and there's nothing wrong with it. But right now, we need to temper those expectations because we don't know which Bull team is going to come out each and every night. Again, that's what makes all this so frustrating with this team, because you are supposed to be winning these games as the Chicago Bulls. If the Bulls handle business versus the Washington Wizards the other night, if the Bulls handle business versus the Brooklyn Nets the other night, we're having a whole different conversation on where this team is and where they could potentially be when it's all said and done. I also want to add, this is great experience for these young guys. I believe that your 5 building parts for the team to push forward, and then you figure it out from there, are your Ayo Dosunmus, your Kobe Whites, your Patrick Williams, your Julian Phillips, your Dalen Terry, and now you can start adding Orlop Batim to that. That's 6 players that you have that are young, players who's shown a little bit of something, who you can continue to move this thing forward. That's why I believe that this experience right here, understanding what you need to do and what the mindset needs to be before you come into these games, how you need to approach each quarter, how you need to approach and take care of leads, how you need to claw back and fight back to get the lead back and take it and, keep the lead. I think all of this is just great experience for these young guys because you're getting the leadership from DeMar DeRozan. You know what I'm saying? As the lead dog. You're getting a little bit from Nikola Vucevic. I'm not going to completely wash him out. And then the other veterans around the squad. You know what I'm saying? You got your Javonte Green that's now back up with the squad. You got Andre Drummond on the squad. So that it's a nice mix of vets with young pieces. And the experience right now is something necessary to help continue push this thing forward. So the matchup tonight, we will be watching. Make sure you're tuned in for the live call tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the noti bell, because once the game ball is up in the air, we will be live. A few minutes prior to it, and we will be live. So tune in. Who do you have in tonight's matchup versus the Atlanta Hawks? Me, I'm going with the Chicago Bulls. You gotta get it done. You gotta get it done. That's just how I'm looking at it. And it's no excuses. So, hey, if you're on the court, you gotta play. And you got to handle business. That's just how I'm looking at it. But that's it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to another episode of Shy Boys Podcast. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave your comments below. Let's chop it up and let's talk Chicago Bulls, baby. This is another episode of Shy Boys Podcast. I'm Bobby. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure.
Cognac.